Oh boy, what happened? I like to think I have a very high tolerance for films. Of course, I have an extensive appreciation for and love my fair share of well-written and well-made movies, but there's no shortage of incompetent, sloppy, and nonsensical films I absolutely adore, or can manage to watch and still thoroughly enjoy myself. A relevant example is Godzilla King of the Monsters, a film congested by deus ex machina, contrivances, horrific editing, lazy characterization, and has a plot held together by a thread. However, it's a film I absolutely love as a diehard Godzilla fan because of how much it respects the lore, and I enjoy more every time I watch it. We all have our guilty pleasures. But once in a while, there's a film that comes out that's so incomprehensible, so lazy, and so bafflingly idiotic, it not only destroys your suspension of disbelief, but makes you wonder how in the world it was even made. Godzilla vs. Kong is very much one of those films. I was very excited for and fully intended to enjoy it. Despite the fundamental issues with King of the Monsters, there was still a line of logic present throughout the film I could follow. I could at least understand what was happening or why characters were doing certain things, however nonsensical the rationale might have been. I expected something similar from Godzilla vs. Kong. An undemanding film that made little sense, but at least had a basic sense of cause and effect, an understandable story, and respected the Godzilla and Monsterverse lore. I don't feel like that's too much to ask from people paid millions of dollars to make these films. By the time the credits rolled, however, I was speechless. Not only that, I was seething with rage. Never before has a film's writing and storytelling caused such a reaction. I was in disbelief, not just due to the fact I couldn't believe this film was as bad as it is, but because everyone around me seemed to love it. I had to be missing something, surely. There's no way this movie is this terrible. I spent the following week rewatching all three Monsterverse films before going to see Godzilla vs. Kong again, with the intention of enjoying and appreciating it more. But it was worse the second time. Rewatching the previous films in this franchise only managed to highlight how Godzilla vs. Kong retcons and breaks the continuity of the Monsterverse, in addition to its own broken plot and characters. I gave this film the benefit of the doubt, not once, but twice. And it gives me no pleasure to say, Godzilla vs. Kong is simply one of the stupidest and most incompetent films I've ever seen. But, then again, what did you expect from the guy who directed the Netflix live-action adaptation of Death Note? A film reviled by fans of the anime and manga, and generally considered one of the worst adaptations of anything ever. There's barely a single sequence in Godzilla vs. Kong that doesn't present catastrophic issues with continuity and/or logic. I'm blown away at how much this film spits in the face of the most elementary aspects of storytelling, such as character development, plot progression, cause and effect, continuity, and intelligence itself. In this 5-part series of videos, I'll be going through Godzilla vs. Kong and breaking down why it simply does not function as a sequel to King of the Monsters, an entry in the Monsterverse, or as a cohesive story. This will be a merciless, unapologetic, uncensored, and ungodly rant, so if you're the kind of person that needs a trigger warning, I guess you can consider this it. Also, let me go ahead and get this out of the way so I don't get messages about it. I know there are several comics and novelizations that have been written about this film that supposedly add to and flesh out the characters more and explain away plot holes and whatnot. However, this video is solely focused on the film itself, so as far as I'm concerned, those can fuck right off. I really don't give a shit what some writer, unaffiliated with the film, did to try to fix Adam Wingard, Eric Pearson, and Max Bornstein's fuck-ups. A film should be able to stand on its own and take care of itself, so if it needs third-party material or the audience to develop its characters and build its world for it, then it has fucked up along the way. So, on that note, let's begin. The film starts off with the legendary Warner Brothers logos, obviously, which are in a very similar tribalistic style as the ones from Godzilla King of the Monsters. There are also some technological glitches here and there. It's a nice piece of continuity and I appreciate it. Unfortunately, the film starts right after, and we already run into problems from the first frame. Somewhere on Skull Island. Why somewhere on Skull Island? Wouldn't just saying Skull Island be specific enough? You know, I have no doubt this was a reference to Kong Skull Island, where that film opened with but it actually made sense in that case because the Pacific Ocean is, you know, really fucking big, and where these two planes crash is supposed to be kept a mystery at that point. It's a way of putting us in the two pilots' shoes by leaving us in the dark on where they are, which will translate to the rest of the characters. Simply saying the Pacific Ocean doesn't narrow it down and raises more questions, and saying Skull Island is too transparent given how the film is trying to build up to and mystify this place. The whole point of the film is discovering Skull Island and uncovering its secret tribes, creatures, climate, and terrain. Godzilla vs. Kong doesn't have this excuse, as Skull Island and Kong have already been established, so you don't need to get any more specific than that. Just saying Skull Island would have been fine, but the inclusion of the somewhere makes it silly more than anything. This is going to be a long video, isn't it? We pan over to Kong, who's awaking as the morning sun rises in the distance. He yawns and stretches while Bobby Vinton's melodic dance song Over the Mountain plays in the background.
Over the mountain, across the sea.
Already, something just feels off. The last time we saw Skull Island, multiple people were brutally killed as the characters desperately attempted to escape. Kong ripped out the throat of a skullcrawler and killed dozens of young soldiers on the cusp of returning home to their families after a brutal war they didn't choose to fight in. Not to mention the fact several people were graphically shown getting impaled through the face or ripped to shreds in a bloody mess. Kong Skull Island was pretty consistently foreboding and ominous, while placing explicit detail on the vicious creatures that could be lurking around every corner.
Keep your eyes open. Up in the trees, too.
Why?
Ants. Big ones. There's one. Sounds like a bird, but it's a fucking ant.
It highlighted how unforgiving and unpredictable Skull Island was. Now, its whole atmosphere has changed to be more cartoonish and goofy, with Kong casually strolling around, scratching his ass, while a dance song similar to something you'd hear in a pretentious nature documentary plays in the background. This is a stark contrast to how Skull Island was portrayed in its last appearance, and contradicts the tone surrounding Kong and this entire island. God, we're already off to a horrible start. Intermittently cut with Kong strolling around are scenes of a little girl who appears to be part of the Iwi tribe of Skull Island. She's fashioning a doll in Kong's likeness and runs through the flora seemingly to meet Kong. As she does so, there's a strange piece of technology up in one of the trees which appears to be a camera. That's odd. The little girl stops right in front of where Kong is walking and holds up her doll. The camera then zooms in on her ear as the sound completely fades out for a while, indicating that she's deaf. This is a neat way to convey that with some good sound editing. However, I want you to keep in mind the scene is trying to say she's completely deaf. It might be an important thing to keep note of for later. Kong stops in front of Deaf Girl and crouches down on his knees to better look at her. The two share eye contact for a good while, which establishes there's a connection between them. At first, Kong's expression has hints of curiosity, but that seems to change to annoyance as he stands back up. He takes the tree he fashioned into a spear and angrily hurls it into the sky. But wait, that's no sky. It turns out to just be a simulation with some beams and electricity behind a honeycomb screen. Kong seems legitimately taken aback and bewildered initially as he lets out another angry roar, while Deaf Girl looks at him with worry. Not a word has been spoken yet, and already so much can be inferred about the two's relationship. We then zoom outside of the fake Skull Island to the real Skull Island, which is being hammered by thunderstorms and lightning. Text on the screen reveals the simulated dome thing as Kong containment on Monarch's Skull Island outpost. Why is Kong being contained in a simulated dome thing? Why is the weather on Skull Island suddenly so torrential? What's going on with the Iwi tribe? Well, stay tuned for answers. Also, do you remember how during the end credits of King of the Monsters a news clipping said the Titans were converging on Skull Island? What have they been up to? How did Kong react to their arrival? Did he fight them? I really hope we see more of this. It could be really interesting. The scene cuts back to inside the simulated dome thing where we see a woman looking at the damage while Kong walks off in the background. Since this character is supposed to be similar to English primatologist Jane Goodall, I'll be referring to her as Lame Goodall. A Humvee pulls up behind Lame Goodall and some nerd guy who never shows up again after the scene exits. He expresses his concerns that the simulated dome thing won't contain Kong for much longer and they need to consider other alternatives. Lame Goodall responds that Skull Island is the only thing that's keeping Kong isolated, and if they remove him, Godzilla will come find him. So are you saying that other Titans wouldn't be able to reach Skull Island? Which, I mean...
Bitch, please!
Are you saying the simulated dome thing is able to protect Kong? And to that, I have to ask, have you seen what Godzilla does to buildings? This thing is barely containing Kong, so what chance do you think it stands against Godzilla? Is it because Skull Island is remote and thus will be overlooked by Godzilla? Again, that's horseshit. Throughout this series, the Titans have seemingly had the ability to sense each other and intercept them. Godzilla was able to track down the Mudos in Godzilla 2014, and King Ghidorah in King of the Monsters. Why is it he doesn't have that ability now when it's convenient for this film's plot? Man, it would be really awkward for this whole scenario if this ability was brought up later on for a different plot point. Also, something that's established in this film is the Titans are theorized to have an instinct to return to their evolutionary origin, which is the center of the Earth, or Hollow Earth as referred to in this film. Additionally, it's later expressed that Skull Island is believed to be like Hollow Earth but on the surface, hence why the Titans were converging on it. With that being said, Godzilla should know about Skull Island and be drawn to it himself, and thus find Kong. Based on everything that's been presented by the franchise up to this point, there's no reason Godzilla shouldn't have gotten to Kong by now given that it's been 5 years since King of the Monsters. I'm trying to understand you, film, why are you making it so difficult? Lame Goodall then feels the need to reference the premise for this film.
Can't be two alpha titans. The whole theory of an ancient rivalry stems from Iwi mythology.
This is honestly probably one of the most forced pieces of exposition I've seen in a while. Why are you telling this to Nerd Guy? Shouldn't he already know that, given the fact they have Kong in a simulated dome thing? Wouldn't the first thing someone asks upon hearing King Kong is being contained in a simulated dome thing be, why though? Nerd Guy should be well aware of why they're keeping Kong here, so why, aside from spelling out the plot for us plebs, would Lame Goodall explain all this to him? It's perfectly fine to catch up the audience to the status quo and explain what's going on. But it's entirely different when you're a baby step away from having the character look to the camera and say, "This is the plot of the film, guys." Hell, I mean, just look at her. The actress is only about 5 degrees away from facing directly at the audience. It's very subtle. Yes, this may be a nitpick given that it's only a couple lines of exposition and doesn't have much bearing on the film as a whole, but these lines of exposition are presented in such a blunt and graceless way, and this presentation doesn't make any sense given who the characters are and what they do. These are the things you need to keep in mind when writing dialogue, no matter how inconsequential it might be. This is just among the first of countless examples of lazy writing in this film. Deaf Girl then runs over to Lame Goodall, who, as it turns out, acts as a surrogate mother to the girl. They communicate through sign language, and Deaf Girl tells Lame Goodall that Kong's angry. Yeah.
No shit.
Lame Goodall then tells Deaf Girl to go wait in the Humvee behind them, and despite initially protesting, Deaf Girl does so. Lame Goodall and Nerd Guy conclude their conversation, with the latter questioning if the former doubts Kong can handle himself in a fight. Lame Goodall responds that there must be another way, and the scene ends. Despite some lazy dialogue, continuity issues, and questions about the world building, this whole opening sequence is pretty inoffensive. It reintroduces us to Kong while showcasing his relationship with Deaf Girl, along with Lame Goodall's perspective on the matter. Especially when compared to most of the other scenes in this film, this one wasn't terrible. Anyway, so in a surprising turn of events, we transition over to what I think is one of the best scenes in the film, the opening credits. In spite of how angry this awful film has made me each time I watch it, I still find myself getting excited whenever this scene starts. It's ominous, it's intense, it's foreboding, and it perfectly sets the stage for this massive historical battle that's about to take place. There are also some nice pieces of information throughout that hint at the plot of the film. In particular, the aforementioned Hollow Earth, and scientists researching the matter being discredited. Additionally, the legends of Godzilla and Kong being ancient rivals is emphasized at multiple points, which leads me to question why the exposition at the beginning was even necessary, but that's beside the point. These opening credits retain the same format as the previous films by having newspaper clippings, documents, and audio relevant to monsters and Monarch with the credits appearing over them. Okay, so something I do take issue with about this format is the volume of plot-relevant information flying across the screen. Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong's credit sequences are both guilty of this, with the latter being the most affected. The headlines and files that are presented on the screen are useful for the audience to know for what's going on in the film, but they're only shown for a second, at most, before moving on to the next piece of information. Elements like Hollow Earth, the state of Skull Island, and the whereabouts of the other Titans, among others, are glossed over in split-second clips that aren't expanded upon and don't actually amount to anything. Simply put, these second-long images are the world-building and background, as Godzilla vs. Kong hits the ground running and barely stops to explain how or why anything is happening. Now, to be fair, King of the Monsters end credits really fucked this film over by vomiting out a truckload of world building for Godzilla vs. Kong to develop and expand upon. But what separates the good directors and writers from the Adam Wingards and Max Borensteins is their ability to take those elements from previous films and figure out how to integrate them into the plot and franchise as a whole. They come up with interesting ways to use those setups and work them into the narrative or expand on them to some capacity. I'll go into more detail about this when these elements become more relevant for the plot. Regardless, this is a really cool sequence that's aided by the track playing in the background. It's loud, bombastic, epic, and very similar to Godzilla's theme. For added continuity, clips and images from the previous films in the franchise are shown in conjunction with some biological information about Godzilla and Kong's species. The opening credits end with the logo slowly appearing on screen, with Godzilla and Kong's name highlighted by green and gold lights respectively, a reference to the original King Kong vs. Godzilla logo. If the entire film had the same level of writing as these scenes, I would probably find it more tolerable. Okay, so, as I said, I really like this sequence, and I feel like it sets the tone nicely for a conflict of this scale. It's grand and ominous, but unfortunately, it comes moments after this. Godzilla vs. Kong is nearly bisected by its tone, with it trying to be a light-hearted, goofy tale with wisecracking, plucky characters, and an epic story of two monsters coming head-to-head in a battle millennia in the making. While I have a lot of issues with Godzilla 2014's depiction of Godzilla and balance between human and monsters, I think the film is excellent tonally. From the first couple seconds, it presents a dark and foreboding mood, which carries throughout the film. Through each storyline and location, the suspense is maintained, and crescendos to the appearance of the monsters, and then keeps building. In spite of this overarching suspense, the film knew when to ease up during moments that are more heartfelt and less intense. Godzilla 2014 managed to balance its scenes and their tones appropriately while maintaining a consistent atmosphere. I really liked the darker tone and thought it was very effective and something I would have liked for them to continue, but if future installments wanted to do something different, then at least be consistent with the new tone. Godzilla vs. Kong has no shortage of scenes, but the tone completely betrays the intention and stakes of the plotline. It just makes for a very confusing watch. We then go from one of the best sequences in the film to what is a strong contender for the worst scene. It fittingly features one of the worst characters, who I will not so lovingly refer to as Tweedly Dipshit for reasons you'll find out soon. So Tweedly Dipshit runs a podcast dealing with titans and conspiracy theories relating to a company called Apex Cybernetics. He's been working at this company as an engineer for 5 years doing deep cover because he suspects there's some, quote, vast corporate conspiracy going on there. Before going into the Apex facility in Pensacola, he explains in his podcast that he's planning to extract hard evidence related to this conspiracy that will wash away all of Apex's lies. However, he doesn't actually know anything about this conspiracy and can just feel something bad is going on there.
Something bad is going on here. I don't know what it is, but I'm about to walk in and download hard evidence and expose a vast corporate conspiracy.
Yeah, film, you shouldn't have had this character say that. It damn near destroys his plan. When he goes in to extract hard evidence, what does he expect to look for if he doesn't know anything about this corporate conspiracy? Where does he plan to look if he doesn't know anything about this corporate conspiracy? How will he be able to tell what's actually a part of this vast corporate conspiracy and not just some project this revolutionary and innovative tech company is working on? This one line fucks this character harder than his dead wife ever did. It would be really helpful to know what Tweedly Dipshit has seen that led him to suspect there was some secretive, sinister project going on at Apex. Giving the audience some kind of idea about what he suspects might be happening will lend more credence to the protagonist. I mean, at the very least, have him briefly describe what all he's witnessed that led him to this conclusion, or more clarity on what he thinks might be going on and why it makes him suspicious. As it stands now, this is a conspiracy nut that thinks something evil's happening at Apex Cybernetics, but has no claims, no evidence, and therefore no credibility. The film is just forcing the audience into a position where we just have to accept he's right, and this is all true simply because he's the protagonist. We're off to a great start, aren't we? You might be asking, what is this Apex Cybernetics? Well, Apex is a technology company that deals with robotics and artificial intelligence. An infomercial from the company's CEO, who's portrayed and framed as nothing more than an archetypal bad guy throughout this film, says that Apex strives to, quote, push past the limits of human potential and create a brave new world. This seems like a pretty massive, influential, and ambitious company, but where have they been in the MonsterVerse films? They weren't once mentioned in the previous installments. Did they just skyrocket in popularity in the 5 years between King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong? If that's the case, then was there something that occurred that caused people to start supporting them and increase their influence? If you're going to introduce such a major entity in the 4th installment of a franchise, you better have a damn good reason why they weren't in previous films. This film doesn't even try to explain it, which makes it so much more pathetic. Anyway, Tweedly Dipshit retrieves a flash drive from his locker and enters some area and into the small office space where some guy is working on the computer. The first thing the guy at the computer says to Tweedly Dipshit when he enters the office area is,
Bernie, you're not supposed to be in here.
Tweedly Dipshit then starts bugging this guy and distracting him from his work, in a scene that instantly reminded me of something from King of Queens my first time watching it.
Just go sharpen your pencil, and I'll take care of her. Wow. God bless America. Tuna in a vending machine. What's next? Hovercrafts? You still on this? You gonna be on this long?
Yes, I have quite a bit of work to do.
Ah, gotcha.
Because I had to wait because they're rendering these new specs, which is going to take over, let's calculate them over 1 hour, maybe even more. So my foreman told me to just take a walk and make some new friends. Oh, now that we're new friends, I can share something with you, right? I know it's here somewhere. This is hand sanitizer that I made from my own garden. It's really amazing. I don't know if I use that.
No problem, I'll wait. Wow, dinosaurs. Interesting stuff. Tyrannosaurus Rex, man. Woo. The big fella. Bet you he had a nice sized ding-a-ling, huh? Too bad his arms are too short to get a go at it, though, right?
Yes. This, check this out. That right there is radio mesh networking with a voice record subprocessor. Guess from what? Come on.
I don't care.
A toaster. It's from a toaster. Look at this thing.
I've got to go.
Okay.
I have to go to the bathroom.
Is it 1 or 2? Because if it's 2, it's probably from these apples. Hey, you want to use the hand sanitizer that I made?
I'm good.
Okay, I'll just stay here.
You have a nice day then, okay? All right.
Unironically, King of Queens did it better. After several minutes, the guy gets up from his desktop and walks away, leaving his computer open and Tweedly Dipshit alone in the office area. Tweedly Dipshit then plugs in the flash drive and starts downloading all the files on the desktop. Alright, let's go over this. Tweedly Dipshit's here because this little office area and computer desktop apparently contained files relating to some vast corporate conspiracy Apex would like to keep protected. How did he know he was going to find what he was looking for in this specific area? Is it because only specific people are allowed in this area and that set off red flags? Well, then how did he think he was going to be allowed in if he isn't authorized?
Bernie, you're not supposed to be in here.
Is it because he knows the guy and he'd have an easier time getting in? No, because the guy clearly doesn't like him and is fully aware Tweedly Dipshit isn't supposed to be in this room. Speaking of which, why don't they have this area more secured? A lock? password, a door, something that will only allow people authorized to access this area to enter. There are clearly certain people that are allowed access, and Tweedly Dipshit isn't one of them, as immediately noted by this guy.
Bernie, you're not supposed to be in here.
Why doesn't Apex protect this area, potentially housing hard evidence about their secret conspiracy project? Well, because Tweedly Dipshit needs to access it for plot reasons. Why doesn't this guy, who knows Tweedly Dipshit isn't supposed to be in this area, not call security and have him removed when he won't leave this computer area? Well, because Tweedly Dipshit needs to access it for plot reasons. So after bugging this guy and interrupting his work for a while, what do you think happens? Does the computer guy call security and have this unauthorized man removed from an area he's not supposed to be in? Does he get pissed off and shout at him, releasing his visible frustration and alert the people nearby about what's going on? Or does he just walk away and leave this person who's not supposed to be in this room or have access to this computer alone with said computer still open and unlocked? Well, if you guessed the first two options, congratulations, you're smarter than the writers of this film. This computer guy knows Tweedly Dipshit's not authorized to be in this area, and thus, he's not authorized to access the computer and the files in it. Why the fuck did he leave it open for essentially this trespasser who he left unsupervised to use and fuck around with some classified files? Usually, if you're stepping away from a desktop with files and information you don't want just anybody to access, you log out, so only those with a password, in other words, only those authorized, can use. This idiot apparently is concerned enough about protecting the information on this computer to call out Tweedly Dipshit for not being authorized to be in this section, but not enough to lock said fucking computer? Again, why doesn't this dude just call security? Tweedly Dipshit isn't allowed to be in this section, is dangerously close to information about Apex's vast corporate conspiracy, and is disrupting the company's efficiency. It's only by pure plot that the computer guy leaves Tweedly Dipshit alone and in a prime position to access these files. Remember, this is all part of Tweedly Dipshit's plan, and it's only by unfathomable convenience he's made it this far. Tweedly Dipshit then starts searching through every single shipping manifest logging shipments from the Pensacola facility, as well as copying them to the flash drive. Why is he retrieving the shipping manifests exclusively? How does he think that's going to reveal anything to him? Does he plan on sitting down in his apartment later and combing over every single document in the hopes of finding something sus? Seems highly inefficient, but sure, fuck it. It's not like he has a clue what the fuck he's doing anyways. Allow me to reiterate a question I asked earlier. How will he be able to tell what's actually a part of this supposed vast corporate conspiracy, and not just some project this revolutionary and innovative tech company is working on? Thankfully for our protagonist in the plot, one file that contains information that will lead him to the next step of his mission is the first to appear on the screen. This file in particular is a shipping manifest logging a large shipment from the Pensacola headquarters to Apex's facility in Hong Kong. Specifically, it's being discharged from sublevel 33. In addition to those pieces of information, the very same file includes a schematic of some Brother Eye looking tech, which causes Tweedly Dipshit to raise a brow. A later scene in the film further explains that this Brother Eye tech doesn't match any of the engineering specifications Tweedly Dipshit's ever seen, and has no official classification. God damn, how fucking nice that out of all of the potential tens of thousands of files on this computer client, the one that randomly decides to appear on the screen is relevant for the plot, and is precisely what Tweedly Dipshit was looking for. It's almost like this is just a bunch of plot-driven bullshit. Also, shouldn't this scene in some way, shape, or form tell us why Tweedly Dipshit found this particular file suspicious? Wouldn't it be wise to communicate that he recognizes this doesn't match any engineering specifications and doesn't have an official classification so that people actually, understand what the fuck is going on? These are the issues you run into when you don't establish your characters and your world. The audience is completely fucking lost. This scene alone is a disastrous failure of narrative, world building, character development, consistency, execution, and logic itself. This whole sequence is an absolute catastrophe, but we're not done. So from there, the compound goes into alert as Godzilla shows up in what's admittedly a very visually striking scene. It's established later on that this appearance by Godzilla is the first time there's been a substantiated Titan sighting in 3 years. Wow. So Godzilla just happened to end a 3-year-long hiatus at the exact time it will benefit the protagonist. Right. Everyone, including Tweedly Dipshit, are evacuating into relief shelters. He then notices some security guards going through a particular set of doors, and he follows them. He eventually winds up running into 2 guys opening a door. They notice him and ask for his clearance. Oh, so Apex does like to protect their secretive projects and ensure authorization. Interesting. Tweedly Dipshit tries some bullshit, and thankfully it doesn't work when the 2 pull their tasers on him.
You know what? The fact that you're talking about clearance tags right now in a time of crisis is incredibly unprofessional. We should be talking about evacuation, you know what I mean? No! Okay!
However, Godzilla's blast hits the building and happens to blow open the wall with the door the 2 are trying to get in and takes them out of the picture. Somehow, our protagonist is perfectly fine, and he looks through the opening at the massive chunk of the complex Godzilla has destroyed, except for one thing that's still intact, the Brother Eye looking tech. He stares at it as Godzilla walks away, and then we move on to the next scene. Holy mother of God. Do I even need to fucking begin with how fucking convenient this all is? Godzilla, after not appearing for 3 years apparently, decides this is the time he's going to show up and stop Apex on this particular day where it would benefit the protagonist, and he just happens to blast the building at the exact time and exact place where it would benefit the protagonist, who just happened to see some guards going through some doors, who just happened to be going where the piece of technology he saw the schematics for minutes prior is held in this entire facility. I also find it interesting that Godzilla, the famous flattener of cities, just fires once at and blows a hole in the facility he clearly doesn't like, and then walks away. Lucky he only did that, because otherwise our plot would be in a lot of trouble. This sequence is trying to portray the Brother Eye piece of tech as the hard evidence Tweedly Dipshit was looking for that will lead to the uncovering of Apex's dirty deeds. But given the kind of company Apex has been established as, there's nothing inherently suspicious or unusual about this piece of tech, aside from it not having any official classification. It's a company that's constantly looking for new ways to innovate with technology, so if Tweedly Dipshit were to release this schematic to the public, I don't think it would be as damning on Apex as much as he thinks it would. Alright, so that abortion of a scene is finally over. Let's recap. Tweedly Dipshit is a conspiracy theorist who's been working at Apex Cybernetics for 5 years and suspects there's some secretive and unethical project going on, a conclusion he's seemingly only come to from a baseless hunch because he has no real claim nor any evidence. He tends to go in and extract several random files to release to the public and expose Apex for a conspiracy he doesn't even have any evidence actually exists. The files he downloads and finds suspicious include a schematic of some piece of technology and some shipping information, which just so happen to appear randomly on the screen. Apex is an international innovative technology company with facilities around the world, so a layout of a piece of technology and a document detailing the shipment of something isn't hard evidence of anything. Tweedly Dipshit's whole plan is a farce and completely baseless, but the film acts like he succeeded because it's so hell-bent on portraying him as the good guy and Apex as evil. Yes, of course, I know, it turns out that Apex is actually working on some massive secretive project and is doing some unethical shit, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But my point here is that this whole scene has done an embarrassing job setting that up and getting this plotline started. And that's gonna do it for part 1. Hopefully this has been enlightening, informative, or just entertaining so far. I've begun editing the other 4 parts, but given how long it took me to get this fucking video finished, I wouldn't expect those to come out for a while. However, my approach to editing those will be much different, which will hopefully result in a quicker process. Regardless, thank you so much for your patience, and I will catch you in the next one.